Hello, and welcome to our May edition of Wright Virtual Visits. My name is Eric Rogers, and I'm the Digital Engagement and Communications Manager at the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy. And I'm coming to you live from our office in downtown Chicago. I want to thank the team that makes these events possible. In particular, my colleague and partner in crime in organizing these, Anna Kaplan, the executive director of the Grey Cliff Conservancy, as well as the whole team at Forever Ready Productions, especially Allison Wong, who is running our show today. And I think Forever Ready has a little video they'd like us to take a look at before we get started. Again, I really want to express our gratitude to Forever Ready Productions. They've helped us greatly level up what we're doing here with Wright Virtual Visits, and the Conservancy has been working with them for more than 4 years now. We just kicked off our collaboration and planning for video production for our annual conference yesterday, in fact. So thank you so much, Allison and the whole team there. So we're really excited about today's episode of Wright Virtual Visits because we are going to a site that we have never featured before in the 4 years that we've been doing this. It's been a great pleasure to collaborate and plan and lay all the groundwork to make this happen with the team at SC Johnson in Racine, Wisconsin. And we've been working with a couple of the tour guides at SC Johnson, in particular with Grace and with Haley, and they're going to join me on screen now as we visit the administration building at SC Johnson. Hello, Grace.
Hi, thanks for joining us. I'm going to be your tour guide today. My name is Grace, but we're going to see the SC Johnson Global Headquarters, which also happens to be the Frank Lloyd Wright Design Administration building today. So I will just kind of get started on the tour. Outside in our carport area is where we usually start the tour. Today we're standing in the lobby area of the administration building, and I'm just going to bring you guys around the interior here as we go through our tour. But outside, one of the things that we always like to feature to guests, which we'll show you a picture of in a moment, is one of Frank Lloyd Wright's signature red tiles. This was one of 25 that he had made in 1950, and we are blessed enough to have one here outside of our administration building that indicate some of his most iconic buildings, or what he thought were going to be most of kind of the long-standing popular ones and impactful. You'll also see the plaque for our National Register of Historic Places. We were designated one of those in 1974. And in 1976, we were also designated a national landmark, which we are extremely honored to have that. We do offer our public tours that come through this building. And we also see our research tower, which is Frank Lloyd Wright designed as well. That opened in 1950, and then some of our other newer buildings that are also architectural masterpieces. So we're really blessed to be here with our SC Johnson campus and all of that going on. But like I said, today's focus is on the administration building. So outside here in the lobby, there's a few features that we always like to point out. One of which is this is a great area that you can see the 3 levels of the administration building here. So we are standing right now on the main level. Above us is the mezzanine level, the 2nd floor, and then above that is the 3rd level, which we also call the penthouse level. So down on this lower level, I'll go into the great workroom in just a bit, but we don't really use this lower level anymore. There are a lot of office spaces and desks down here that have not been in use since March of 2022. So we did shut down kind of most of this building at that point, and we moved a lot of folks over into one of our more newer buildings that were just more conducive to a modern workspace. However, this building has pretty much stayed the same as when we first opened it, which is awesome. One of the little changes that we've made throughout the years is we did add carpeting to most of the building, but right below me right now is the original red rubber tiles that were at one point covering the entire 1st level here. So originally, that's kind of what Frank Lloyd Wright wanted it to look like. These just became a little bit too much for us to maintain as an office building, so we did cover most of it with carpet just to make it a little bit easier on the staff that was doing all that maintenance. So lots of features of this building. I'm going to get into some of the architectural pieces and then also all of the furniture. But I'll move you guys right over here for now, and we're going to take a look at some of the tubes that are used throughout this building. So Frank Lloyd Wright was really kind of into, of course, like natural landscapes, and that's where he wanted most of his buildings to be put up. When he came to visit Racine, he was a little bit upset that we were in an urban landscape, and he really didn't want to put up an office space here. But our leader at the time, who was H.F. Johnson Jr., also our 3rd generational leader, what was that?
If you could slow down a little.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So. There we go.
So H.F. Johnson Jr., he was pretty adamant that we keep our campus right here where it is in Racine, Wisconsin, because we had been here since 1901. And so he didn't want to have to move our building anywhere else, and he knew he wanted kind of a state-of-the-art office space. And so when he first reached out to Frank Lloyd Wright, as was suggested by someone close to him at the time, to put up this state-of-the-art office space for his administrative and clerical staff, he reached out to Frank Lloyd Wright, and Frank was, a little bit challenged with having to put up a building in an urban landscape. So one of the ways that he combated this was the use of natural light. And something that he put up so that we really couldn't see that urban landscape of Racine, but that still let a lot of that natural sunlight in, is his glass tube walls and the ceiling, which I'll get into a little bit later. So this is just a good example of where you can see the use of the glass tubes here. Really, you can't see out of this building at all, except for the front carport area, which is sort of a hidden entrance. But these glass tubes, they do allow a lot of the natural light in. So I'm going to walk you guys into the great workroom now, and then we'll talk a little bit more about some more architectural features of the building. So this is our great workroom space, obviously a very popular part of our tour. People love to come in here, and again, you really feel that natural light and that sense of being in nature. Frank Lloyd Wright really wanted that as much as possible. And you'll see that the use of the glass tubes is continued in the ceiling above me. And we did have some issues with that. Affectionately, a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright buildings are known for leakage. And on the ceiling, originally, all that the ceiling was those glass tubes, and they were stuck together with something called mastic, which is actually a material that dries like concrete and it cracks really easily. And so we were seeing a lot of leaking issues, as you can imagine, with all the different weather that Wisconsin gets. And our janitorial staff at the time was affectionately called the Bucket Brigade. And so they were always running around when a storm was rolling in and placing buckets under the roof as necessary. But one of the ways that we tried to combat that was with the use of silicone caulking when Dow Corning came out with that in the 1950s. And we did replace all of that mastic with silicone caulking, which just flexes better in the Wisconsin weather changes. And we were able to combat some of the leaking that way. In the 1980s, however, we did add a whole roofing system to the top of this building to better protect it. And now that is what continues the roof instead of just those glass tubes. So kind of one of the little minor changes we've made. But for the most part, like I mentioned, what you're seeing behind me is pretty much what this building has always looked like. One of the other little changes we've made to it is adding the cubicle systems. So anything that you see on the first floor and the second floor as far as cubicles has been added throughout the years to the building, as we just needed more of those private workspaces for some of the folks that would have been working in here. Originally, like I said, our administrative staff was down here when the building first opened in 1939. It did take about 3 years for the building to be constructed. I believe we originally started at $1.4 million was the ending budget for the building in the 1930s, which translates to $31.5 million in today's money. So this building really was expensive, but again, H.F. Johnson Jr. really wanted this to be really state-of-the-art and didn't really want just a basic office buildings for his workers. He thought that that was a good way to connect people to SCJ, which is great. Some other things that I'll talk about here is the use of the columns. So Frank Lloyd Wright did want these columns to kind of continue the natural aspects of his design. And these columns are actually known as dendriform, which means tree-shaped. One of the unique things about them is that they're only 9 inches about in diameter at the very bottom of the columns, and they're about 18.5 feet at the widest part at the very top. And they're actually hollow on the inside. They're only about just under 4 inches thick of steel mesh and concrete, and they're what's holding up the entire building. So each of the columns are able to hold at least 12 tons of weight, and that's what Frank Lloyd Wright designated when he was first putting together his architectural plans, because again, these are what's going to be holding up the entire building. None of the walls that you see around us are load bearing at all, which is pretty interesting. So when he first submitted these plans to the Wisconsin Industrial Commission, sans an architectural license, by the way, he went to get one of those afterwards, but kind of a funny story. He submitted these plans to the Wisconsin Industrial Commission, and they said there's no way that these are going to hold up 12 tons of weight each in order to sustain the weight of this building. And Frank Lloyd Wright, again, was a very hard-headed person. He was pretty confident in his designs and was not going to take no for an answer. So he organized a test demonstration and invited some of those Wisconsin Industrial Commission folks out to our site here, set up one of his columns, and piled a bunch of iron and sandbags to the top of one of them until he got to 12 tons of weight, and that was therefore proving that commission wrong. He just kept piling weight to the top of one of them until he got to 60 tons of weight, and we're actually going to show you a video of that right now, that test being done. So I've gone over a lot of the architectural features of the building. One other minor change that we've made throughout the years is that we did have to add the brass rails that you see above me on the second floor and also subsequently the third floor. Those were added because the ledge up there is quite short and it was a little bit dangerous. So that's one of the other little minor changes that we made to the building. We tried to use that design to be a little bit cohesive to the building itself with the use of that brass, because you will also see kind of behind me here, there are on either side brass elevators, which are also known as our birdcage elevators, simply because that's what they look like. But these elevators are actually hydraulic. They're quite a smooth ride when they are working properly, but they also have another function, which was hiding the original air conditioning in our building. We were one of the first commercial buildings in the United States to have air conditioning, which was great for our office staff when they were working here in this warm Wisconsin summer months. But the way that the air conditioning works is that there's actually 2 tubes that stick out of the top of the building that Frank Lloyd Wright commonly referred to as the nostrils of the building. And those are behind the elevators there. They pull air in from outside, push it down into the basement, and then that cooler basement air is forced out through the ventilation system around the mezzanine here. However, it's since been updated into a more modern HVAC system. As I mentioned, we did have folks in this building using this space as is up until March of 2022. So we had to do some little adjustments throughout the years to accommodate all of that staff that would have been in here. Most recently, I believe our accounting and our law departments were down here. So it was a definitely hustling and bustling building up until just a couple of years ago. And like I said, we've kind of converted this into more of a museum space for tour guests to come through. And we're super happy to show it to you guys virtually today. So now I'm going to get into a little bit more of the furniture pieces throughout the building. Frank Lloyd Wright did design over 40 pieces of furniture for us. And so you'll see a lot of that out here which is really cool to be able to have a lot of that preserved for us to show guests like yourselves today. The use of the desks themselves, which we'll show a couple pictures of some variations here now. I believe there's a bathtub desk and then also one of our more commonly used desks. So he did design some variations of desks for those who would be using them for specific sources. But here today we do have one of our desks out here. This is one of the more commonly used desk designs. There are 3 levels to the desk, which mimic the 3 levels of the space that I talked about earlier. They also have the curved corners here. There's not a lot of 90-degree angles in this building because that's another way that would have brought us away from nature. So Frank Lloyd Wright really did use a lot of curvature throughout the building. This is an example of a desk that would have been used by a manager, so a little bit of a nicer wood. Throughout the building, you'll most commonly see maple top desks, which were used for most of the staff that would have been working in here. Something else that you'll notice that's pretty unique about the design of the desks themselves is that these drawers here actually swing out instead of roll out. Frank Lloyd Wright thought that typical desk drawers that rolled out, you were kind of losing things in the back of them and they weren't a good use of space. So he wanted his desk drawers to swing out, which I think was a pretty effective use of those drawer systems. Something else he did think of when he was designing our furniture was that he actually hung the trash cans on the desks instead of allowing them to be seated on the floor. That's because he really didn't want to have to make the janitorial staff have to go around and pick up trash cans as they were buffing out all of that red rubber tile constantly, because like I said, it did require a lot of maintenance. And so he hung the trash cans off the side of the desks to allow for our janitorial staff to easily sweep and wax underneath those trash cans. So it's kind of interesting the things that he kind of thought of for function versus really just wanted to go and be design based and didn't really think of the functionality of things. Another example of that is the use of his chairs. So right now we're going to show a photo of the original 4-legged desk chair, which was actually the second design of the desk chair. This, what I have right here, is a 3-legged desk chair. You'll notice there's only 3 legs that make up the chair here. And Frank Lloyd Wright, he really had posture in mind when he was designing these. He figured, you know, people were going to be working in this space all day. They'd be sitting up straight at their desks, and then either one of your feet would be on either side of that front leg there. And when they are on the ground, it effectively turns this into a very stable 5-legged desk chair. The idea behind that kind of makes sense, but of course people are not always going to be sitting like that throughout the day. And so as soon as you kind of cross your legs or change your center of gravity at all in this chair, you literally are thrown right out of it. So the center of gravity of this chair is a little bit odd. And as soon as you started working here, you would realize that when you were thrown out of your desk chair. And so people were literally getting thrown out of it left and right. And it was sort of an initiation sequence. Everyone else that was working down here would get up and clap for you when that happened. And it would kind of welcome you into the great workroom, which was, of course, a unique space to work in. And H.F. Johnson Jr., who again was our 3rd generational Johnson leader, was upstairs on the penthouse level office, and he was hearing all of this commotion all the time, all this clapping going on. And so he called Frank Lloyd Wright up and said, "Frank, I love everything you've designed." Had to butter him up a little bit, but these chairs are such an issue for my people. And so Frank said, "You'll have to get used to them. I'm not changing anything for you guys." However, the story goes that Frank came to visit with H.F. Johnson Jr. upstairs in his penthouse office at some point, and apparently the floor was waxed extra well that day. And suspiciously, a pencil rolled off a desk in the middle of the meeting, and Frank bent over out of his chair to pick it up and fell out of his own design. And so he dusted himself off and said, "I guess I'll have to get used to this as well." But eventually he was broken down enough to change into the 4-legged design, which we'll show for you guys again as a comparison. So again, kind of interesting the things that he thought of for function versus design within this building. But we have had a lot of love for it throughout the years. Of course, the people who were working in here most recently have a lot of kind of sentiment about being able to work in this state-of-the-art space, which has kept its kind of modern design throughout the years, even though it was put up in 1939, which is kind of a wild experience to say you had a chance to work at the very own desks that were designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. So that kind of concludes our tour of the administration building. We are going to take questions at this time, which I'll be happy to answer live if anyone wants to shoot some of those over.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Grace. I think this was a terrific little taste of what visitors can experience if they go in person. So I think, I want to remind everybody that's watching live that you can put questions in the chat and we can ask those. We've got a few minutes here, but we've got a couple of questions that have already come in. One of the questions, which I think you partially addressed, so this specific space, at least this floor and all the furniture in it, it's not being used currently. It's set up kind of as a museum, right?
Yes, correct. We don't use the lower level of this great workroom or behind me on the second level. However, there is a majority of the building that is surrounding the carport area out front that connects actually to the research tower, which was Frank Lloyd Wright designed. And that is all in use still today. And so this is kind of the only space that's not really in use. And again, we're just trying our best to preserve this because we know how much of an iconic building it is.
Are in the other spaces within the building that are in use, is anybody using that Wright designed furniture still?
Great question. Actually, yes. So we do have some desks upstairs on the second and the third level in some of the individual offices that are in use, and people are using those still today, which is kind of cool to be able to say you were one of the last to use that.
So when the building was originally built, the campus was a manufacturing facility. Mm-hmm. Is that still the case today?
Yeah, great question. So obviously we have a very strong presence in Racine, Wisconsin as a company. We were at one point actually having production happen on this site for some of our products, but that was until about the 1980s when we did move production off campus and we moved it elsewhere in Racine. So if there's any manufacturing happening still in Racine, it's not right here downtown Racine, but it's in one of our other campuses, as well as, of course, all over the world for some of our product lines.
We've got a question about something that I think was spotted behind you. Is it a magazine rack or a mailing center or something?
Yes. This was originally part of actually the postal service that we had in our campus here. So it was part of the mail service. If you worked at a desk down here, which of course there used to be a lot of people, a lot of hustle and bustle, you would come up here to collect any company newsletters that went out or any mail addressed to you personally.
So they didn't bring it around to your desks. You had to come
exactly. You had to come deal with it yourself. But it's kind of cool. It is actually Frank Lloyd Wright designed as well. He put it in there.
So looking up at the ceiling, you obviously talked about the importance of natural light coming in through those glass tubes. Is there now artificial lighting in the mix coming in there?
Yes, great question. There is artificial lighting now. When Frank Lloyd Wright first designed this building, of course, he anticipated that the sunlight would suffice for most of the time. However, of course, if you're familiar with Wisconsin weather at all, the sun sets quite early here in the winter. So we did have to actually add artificial lighting, which we did along the mezzanine. You can see those lights are on now. And then also we added light bulbs to the ceiling itself and integrated those there.
Somebody picked up on the fact that when the choice was made to replace the rubber tile flooring with carpet flooring, that may have resulted in less need for one of SC Johnson's products in the space. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Of course, nowadays, you're seeing less and less floor wax. People just don't use that product anymore. So I feel as though it kind of correlated with the lack of floor care nowadays. We still, of course, sell a lot of those products, but people are less and less waxing their floors. So I think it kind of worked with the timeline of maybe the popularity of those products because as you mentioned, we did actually start kind of as a floor care company. We actually started in 1886 as a parquet flooring company. And then at one point started to outsell the parquet flooring with our floor wax that was developed by Samuel Curtis, our founder. So he just fully switched over to supplying floor care instead of parquet flooring. And we kind of grew into a company that way with all of our different product lines now.
So attached to the administration building, of course, there is another design by Frank Lloyd Wright. Can you talk a little bit about that? And maybe that's something we'll see in the future.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So the way that our campus is set up, we have the administration building here, and then attaching the administration building to actually the research tower is our carport section of the area. And there's buildings that surround that as well. So the carport section is a little bit low to the ground, and that's the use of something that Frank Lloyd Wright frequently used, which is called compression and release. So the carport area really isn't meant to be the architectural feature of this design. This space is really meant to be the release of that compression and release. So if you come to our campus in person, you will get a taste of that. But then connecting, of course, to that carport is the research tower, which did open in 1950, and it was the second of our two Frank Lloyd Wright design buildings that we have on campus. And that basically was originally our research and development center. So it's a bunch of laboratories that are actually stacked on top of one another in a cantilever tower. And that building has not been in use since the 1980s when we actually moved production off of this site. But that's due to the use that there's only one exit to the building. So it became a little bit unsafe for us to continue use of it, but we do still offer tours, and you can actually head up into the third level of the building today, which is awesome.
Well, we've got one more question that's come in, and then we'll start to wrap up. So at its peak, when all of these desks in the great workroom were occupied, how many people worked in that building?
Great question. Haley, behind the camera, do you know?
Yeah, actually, so at its peak, there was about 200 employees working in this building.
So yeah, if you didn't hear that, there was about 200 employees working down here at its peak use.
And how many people today work on the overall campus in Racine?
I believe it's about 700 today. So we do have quite a large campus here downtown. And of course, we employ people all over Racine because we have two other campuses that are commonly used in the Racine area.
Great. Well, as we kind of wrap up, one of the most important questions that we always like to ask is, how can people come see this in person?
Great question. Yes. So we do offer tours during the warmer months. We offer them from Wednesdays to Sundays. When it gets a little bit cooler out after Labor Day, we switch to only the weekends. But we are constantly offering tours around, and you can sign up for those at scjohnson.com/visit. So again, it was scjohnson.com/visit to see our tour offering.
Great. Well, I definitely want to encourage everyone to do that. Anna and I had the pleasure of visiting in person a couple of months ago when we were first planning this, and it was really a magical experience. So thank you so much to Grace and Haley for collaborating with us on this, and again to Anna and Allison working behind the scenes to make today possible. And of course, to everyone who has tuned in live to watch today's episode or will watch the recording after that becomes available. Thank you for continuing to follow along as we explore Wright's buildings all over the country. I want to remind everybody on July 11th, we will come back together for a celebration of the anniversary of the inscription of Frank Lloyd Wright's 20th century work on the UNESCO World Heritage List. So we hope that you will plan to join us for that. And then later in the year, we'll be going to the Pope Leahy House in Virginia, and then the Historic Park Inn Hotel in Mason City, Iowa. So please do plan to stick around for those. Thank you so much again, and take care.